Hello everyone, my name is Sam Spade and welcome to another Coding Fundamentals in GML tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about debugging. This is an introduction to debugging where we're going to talk about some general ideas related to debugging in general. And then we'll have some tutorials on the tools that GML provides to help us debug. Everybody makes mistakes, and in programming, we call those mistakes bugs. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, you'll make mistakes. Since you're going to make mistakes, you're going to have to learn how to fix those mistakes, and that's why debugging is so critical to programming. It's one of the most important skills you can have. You've got to be able to look through your code and figure out what is going wrong. And that requires thinking. If you're making a game, that means you're making something new. You're doing something that, at least in some small way, no one has ever done before. Or you're doing it perhaps in a different way than other people have done. And that means that you're going to have to interact with whatever you've written, which is going to be in some way unique to anything else, and figure out what's wrong. And this leads us to perhaps the most important thing to accept when debugging. And that is that your code caused the problem. The computer never makes mistakes. Your code will execute exactly as it's written. Not only does the computer never make mistakes, but GML doesn't really make mistakes. Obviously, in some areas, there might be a bug, but in general, that's not the case. In fact, I would say that it's almost never the case, and it's certainly never the case with very basic elements of coding like if statements or variables and so on. These things are tried and true in GameMaker Studio 2, and they always work. And part of the reason it's important to accept that your code caused the problem is because that means you can fix the problem. I've seen people say things like, GameMaker is running both the if and the else in my if-else statement in the same step. Or GameMaker is saying this variable isn't declared even though it is. If it's true that GameMaker is making a mistake, then there's nothing you can do about it, because we don't have any control over GameMaker Studio 2's source code. Since every problem is unique, it's really hard to come up with some basic guidelines, but in general, I would say that you want to first identify the problem. And you want to do this with words. You just want to be able to articulate what is actually going wrong. You want to be able to articulate what's supposed to happen and what is actually happening with as much specificity as possible. After you can do this, you want to identify the code that is causing the thing to happen. Again, as specifically as possible. In an ideal world, you would get it down to a single line. You would know which line of code is causing the problem. Often, though, this isn't realistic and you have to get it down to a block, or a script, or some section of code that you're pretty sure is causing the problem. Once you've figured out which code is the problem, then you want to step through that code, whether literally in the debugger or on a piece of paper, and you want to figure out why it is doing what it is doing. Because again, the computer always does exactly what you tell it to. So if it's doing something unexpected or wrong, you've told it to do that. And you want to understand why you've told it to do that, or maybe better, how you told it to do that, so you can fix it. And hopefully once you understand what you've actually told the computer to do, you can understand why it's wrong and what you need to do to change it. GameMaker Studio 2 has a couple very helpful tools for debugging, and we're going to have separate tutorials on each of them, and they are the error message, show debug message, and of course the debugger. Ultimately, debugging is a skill, and like any skill, you'll get better at it the more you practice. But in addition to practice, there are a couple other ways to improve the skill of debugging. The first is to learn how to use the tools that GameMaker Studio provides. Another way is to help other people debug their code. A great way to do this is with the GameMaker Community Forum. Another way is to watch other people debug. You can do this by watching live streams of people code or watching people help other people on the forums. And of course, keep learning how to program. The more you learn, the more you'll understand how code works. And the more you understand how code works, the easier it'll be to find the problems and fix them. In summary, when talking about debugging, thinking is required. You should accept that your code caused the problem. You should identify the problem generally, then identify the problem code, and after that, work to understand why the code does what it does. As always, the links in this slide will be below, along with links to the slides themselves. And I want to call special attention to the Pixelated Pope Private Investigator link. This is a great series by another GameMaker user, where they take some projects that they know have bugs, and then they walk through the process of encountering those bugs for the first time and solving them. It is for GameMaker Studio 1, but it's very similar to GameMaker Studio 2, and again, just watching the process can be helpful. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.